station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
We are ready for the event.
Good morning, Gizmodo. This is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Gizmodo. How do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Well, good morning. This is Rhea Mistrar with Gizmodo. I'm so glad you were all able to join us today. The photographs we've seen come back from the ISS have been really something to see, which made me wonder what the most memorable sight you've come across was, whether a space view or something you saw on the ISS itself.
I think both the sunrises and the sunsets are so beautiful that they almost don't even look real. And we've seen several since we've been here, and it never gets old. We have Jeff Williams, who just joined us, and he's seen many more than us, and I think he may want to say a couple words about it as well.
Yeah, I would just add sunsets and sunrises are beautiful. They're always spectacular, especially as they occur behind varying weather, and especially when you have big, huge thunderstorms that are going up into the atmosphere. That adds a lot of variety to it. It just never gets old.
You know, one of the most intriguing things for me to watch has been the way that each new expedition to the ISS seems to make the space station just a little bit more homey. We've seen a coffee machine, an experimental vegetable garden. Having logged quite a bit of time on the ISS now, between the three of you, what element of home would you like to see added next?
We're just chatting here trying to come up with something because we have lots of the conveniences of home. We have a refrigerator. It would be good to have a full-time freezer. That would be a nice feature. Maybe some ice cream on board. We've got movies we can watch, connection with family on phone. So I think we're in pretty darn good shape.
Tim, you've been on the ISS for a few months now. Jeff, you've only had a few days so far. How long does it take to start to feel comfortable again in microgravity? Is there an awkward learning curve at all for figuring out how to orient yourself again?
Well, I think I can say this time that there was really no learning curve. I felt right back at home when I got here. In previous flights, it has taken, the last flight probably took a couple days anyway, and then the one before that, I would say that you can feel an adaptation for as much as 5 or 6 weeks. But this time it was almost as if I never left.
I hear you've got a new 3D printer headed towards you for the resupply mission, headed up later today. Any plans for what you're going to make first?
Oftentimes when we have experiments like that, the plan is actually dictated to us on what we're going to print. If we had choice in what we could use that 3D printer for, then I'm sure we could be quite creative for the science that's involved.
If you did have that choice, what might you make?
That's a good question. I think perhaps, there's some things here in zero gravity that are lots of fun to play with. We like to play with water and food. And if we could come up with something that was unique to zero gravity in terms of how it would be able to demonstrate our experience here in zero gravity, that would be great. So I think we'll have to put more thought into that to come up with that perfect item.
You're coming to us from the space station's Destiny Lab today, and I was just wondering which experiment each of you is most excited to see the results of.
Yeah, we do so many experiments during a 6-month mission. I think there's about 250 planned for 46, 47. And lots of those experiments will actually just run autonomously from the ground with very little interaction from us. But some of them do require a lot of interaction. And of course, many of those experiments are also done on our own human bodies as well. And for me, I do enjoy the human physiology experiments. I think it's nice to be able to contribute to the science that's going on board the space station for the benefit of everyone back on Earth. Also, there are some exciting experiments. I know Tim might like to say recently he's been involved in some flame combustion experiments, which from I was watching over his shoulder, I found them fascinating to be involved in as well.
I particularly liked this experiment that we did in a glove box. It's right in front of us, in which we were experimenting with different materials and how combustion in zero gravity works with those materials. And so I think for the combustion scientists, they're very excited about it, and we're looking forward to seeing those results, hopefully in the near future.
Jeff, you'll have logged the most time in space of any American astronaut by the end of this mission. And I was curious what you've seen change from your very first mission up to this one.
Well, the most obvious thing is the station itself. The first time I was here, it was 2 modules before Expedition 1 flew. And then about a half a year later or so, Expedition 1 launched. And since then, there's been 17 years of continuous operation of the space station and over 15 years of continuous human presence on the space station, now over 47 expeditions. Subsequent visits, of course, we were at different stages in the assembly. Next time about halfway through. Last time here 6 years ago, we essentially finished the assembly. Now it's a fully operational, full utilization mode, an orbiting laboratory. And it's huge, and we're still all very impressed. Just when we look at it out the window, we got a couple windows that we can see much of the station, and it's very, very impressive facility that this international partnership has managed to put together.
I've got a question from one of our readers for you. What's your favorite space recipe to make in the ISS? And they also want to know if you swap meals amongst different crew members throughout the mission.
We're just thinking about that. What we find is that we have lots of great foods up here, but you learn to combine different foods in certain ways. We're pretty fond of tortillas because you can put just about anything in a tortilla and it combine the different foods. And on occasion, we'll exchange foods with our Russian colleagues. Tim Peake has some special foods up here that we've had a chance to share, and so it definitely adds to the experience, and the quality's been great.
In the resupply mission that's headed up towards you later today, is there anything that you're most looking forward to receiving?
Every one of these vehicles has a little bit of fresh fruit on board. I think we'll be excited to get some of that fresh food. There's always a resupply of different items that we need on board, and so we're excited about getting that, especially some of the science. There's one experiment that I think is going to be very interesting, in which they plan on lighting a fire inside the Cygnus vehicle as it departs, so it'll be interesting to see what the results of that science are. But we're always excited to get new equipment on board because it means that we can do our job better here and get the science done.
All right, well, this is our last question here, it sounds like. So I was just curious, what destination in space, besides the International Space Station, of course, would you most like to hit next?
I think the International Space Station is just a wonderful research platform, and it's paving the way for future exploration of the solar system. And there are so many exciting places to go. I think, the moon certainly offers many opportunities for further exploration and further resources that we can utilize, and obviously stepping stones on the way to Mars as well. And, we're starting to work more and more closely towards that target of a manned mission to Mars. And having just completed the, for Scott Kelly and Misha Kornienko, the one-year mission on board the space station, we're constantly learning about how we can overcome the challenges that face us on that journey to Mars. So I think the future of human spaceflight over the next 10 to 15 years is going to be incredibly exciting.
Well, thanks so much, guys. It was such a pleasure talking with you all. Have a great rest of the mission and a safe flight home.
Thank you so much.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the Gizmodo portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from The Verge.
Station, this is The Verge. How do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Great. Well, I'm so excited to talk with you today. So first off, I would love to have you describe your day-to-day routine on the station. What are your hours like? Is it a typical 9-to-5 gig, and what do you spend most of your time working on?
It's a great question, and it's an interesting place to both work and live because some aspects of our job are sort of like at home. We have a list of events we have to perform every day, but when you wake up and you get out of your sleeping bag in your crew quarters, you float out. Usually we float out to the place where we have all our food stowed and get some coffee and some breakfast and then do some cleanup. And then the rest of the day is really filled with science experiments, with maintenance so that we can maintain the quality of life that we have up here. We exercise for about 2.5 hours every day. And so the day is very full. We work off of a schedule and off of procedures, and we communicate with the ground at all the different control centers to get help with all the different procedures that we execute up here. So we have a full day, and we usually work from about 6 or 6:30 in the morning until about 7 or 7:30 in the evening.
Wow, that definitely is a full day. And you mentioned communication, and that was my next question, is what is your communication like with the ground? How often do you speak with coworkers and loved ones, and what's the biggest form of communication that you use?
Well, during the working day, of course, we're talking with mission control centers all around the world that are supporting us in the science that we're doing on board and the maintenance activities. And so that's probably who we're communicating with most of all. But we also have great communications on board the space station with our families. We can use voice over IP telephones, and effectively we can call anywhere on the planet. So we can keep in touch with friends and families in the evenings once we've finished our working day.
Wonderful. And I'd love to talk more about what is your daily hygiene like? What is the general human upkeep like? How do you deal with no showers, going to the bathroom, all that nitty-gritty stuff?
Yeah, hygiene up here is actually very good. It takes a little bit to get acclimated to working in this environment. Obviously, we don't have a shower, and that's probably one of the things that most of us miss while we're up here and look forward to when we get back in the ground. But we still are able to keep very clean, essentially taking sponge baths. We have a toilet that you would recognize as a toilet, and it works very well. And brushing your teeth and shaving is things like that is just like we do on the ground. You just have to work a little bit harder and get accustomed to managing all the things because, of course, everything floats up here.
Right, and speaking of floating, what has been the biggest adjustment for you, both physically and mentally, with going into microgravity? And do you have a favorite anti-gravity trick?
Well, as a first timer to space as a rookie astronaut, my adaptation was, I know it was really interesting for Tim and Scott at the time to observe, seeing somebody who's never been in space before, gradually progress and learning how to cope with microgravity. It took about 24 hours before I felt actually comfortable, because for the first 24 hours, there's a lot of dizziness and disorientation, just as your vestibular system needs to really shut down. And I think your brain tends to then rely just on information coming from the eyes so that you don't feel nauseous. And then it was a real interesting and fun 2 weeks, I think, kind of developing all the tricks you need to learn how to handle microgravity. And even now, I still enjoy just in this environment, working and living in this environment. It's a lot of fun once you get to master some of the techniques.
Great. And what about the trip to and from the station. Jeff, I know you've done this quite a bit, so which part do you prefer, the launch or the landing?
Boy, they're both highlights, and there's a lot of highlights during the voyage on station as well. I mean, obviously, to get here, you're looking forward to the launch, and it's a very exciting ride. This time it was 5.5 hours as opposed to 2 days to get here, so it was good to get here in a short amount of time. Of course, the landing is pretty dynamic too, and plus, by that time, after 6 months up here, you're ready to go home. So you're very excited about getting back into that into the atmosphere, go through in the atmosphere which is one of the challenges of space flight is safely being able to do that, but it also means that you're going home, and you feel like you're home as soon as you hit the ground, even though it's halfway around the world in the middle of nowhere.
And what about Earth do you guys miss the most? And what do you miss most from gravity? And also, what do you like the most about being in space? What are the pros and cons?
Living in zero gravity is some of the best things about living and some of the most frustrating things about living because, you can't just put your things out on a table and expect it to be there. You have to be very meticulous about all the things that you have. It has to be in a certain place. And you have to remember where you put it because no longer is it just a flat surface in which something can be stowed. It can be stowed on any surface, either with tape or with Velcro. And so that becomes a little bit of a challenge until you get used to living in this very unusual environment.
I'm also curious about what the selection process is like for each mission. What goes into deciding which astronaut is going to fly during which period, and how is the commander picked, and so on like that?
There are a lot of smart guys on the ground that look at the different skills of each individual crew member. And, we have a very, very talented group of people at each one of the different agencies that provide astronauts for the International Space Station, astronauts and cosmonauts. And so, frankly, I think that you can pick a wide variety of people for these missions, and they'll all be very successful. There are very specific skills that we all have to have, even just to be assigned, be able to fly the robotic arm, because we have vehicles that come here that we capture, and then the ground docks it onto the space station. We have spacewalks, and it's a very challenging task, and we have to be proficient in that. And then just be able to work here on space station. So the challenge of each one of the different agencies is to have a pool of people that they can assign. And frankly, I think all of the people that are astronauts in those agencies can be assigned because they have those skills. They've been selected for it, and they've been trained for it. In terms of selecting the commander, there's also a wide variety of people that can be selected for that as well. I think it's good that someone has previous flight experience so they know what to expect. And beyond that, there's just a lot of timing, I think, in terms of who they select and who's available for that flight.
Great. And I'm curious to know, what's the air like up there? Is there a distinct difference between the environment on the space station and the air here on Earth?
We get to enjoy pretty good air up here. It's recycled, it's scrubbed from carbon dioxide and other harmful gases. It's a fairly constant humidity and temperature. The one thing that's very different from planet Earth is we have about 10 times the CO2 level up here. But other than that, it's a pretty good atmosphere. Often people ask about the smell of space and the smell of the space station. I remember it being almost like a clinical smell when I came on board. And I know, Jeff, having just arrived a couple of days ago, said, that very familiar smell. It's quite hard to describe at the space station. And it's similar for when astronauts come back in from a spacewalk as well, and you open up the airlock and you can smell a very distinctive smell. It's almost like, I think, a metallic ionization type of smell. Maybe that's the smell of space. Who knows?
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to speak with me today. This has been a lot of fun, and I feel like I've learned a lot about your daily routine. So thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. Nice chatting with you today.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gizmodo and The Verge. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.